Kiwanis meetings in the past, and of course now he is a member. Jameel is one of the frontline people at MSU today starting classes, although as he informed us beforehand, he is staying as far away from campus as possible. But when he is interacting with students, he is an assistant professor in the history department, also is the director of the Kessel Peace Institute and Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies coordinator. As we know also through all of this, that we have become much more aware of the things around us that are usually taken for granted, I think, by us in everyday life. I've seen lots more sunrises. I've seen lots more sunsets on Facebook, for example, but we've also seen the awareness of the people for whom the things around us are named. And that's one of the things that Jameel is going to talk to us about today. It's about Sibley Park, something that is near and dear to the hearts of most Kiwanians, with that being the location of the Kiwanis Holiday Lights. But let's give a big Kiwanis welcome for Jameel Haque.
Thank you, everybody. John, do I need permission to share screen? I've got a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to give. Okay, I think we've got it. I've tried to position myself strategically in my house to avoid children and interruptions, but I apologize in advance should that happen. I wanted to thank Sharon for sponsoring me to become a new member of Kiwanis, and John and Mike for helping to arrange this, and all of you for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to give you not an apology in advance, but having been to now 3 different Kiwanis presentations, mine is going to be a little bit less fun and a lot more serious. I love Mike Miller's auctions and his classic cars, and the church basement ladies were very entertaining. This is going to be, I think, a challenging presentation for me and for everybody to keep an open mind. I want to point out that I am here as the director of the Kessel Peace Institute, and maybe some of you knew Dr. Kessel when he was an educator here in Mankato. His nickname was affectionately Dr. Doom because of the lectures that he would give that were very serious. And I'd like to sort of continue his tradition here. But I want you to know that I am speaking to you with an open mind and an open heart, not trying to tell anybody what to think. I'm just trying to convince you that I'm right, but in a way that I'm listening to you rather than telling you. Historians are difficult to invite to give lectures because they like to talk. Those of you who are aware of the Harry Potter series or have children that are aware of the Harry Potter series, the history professor in that series was so intent on giving lectures that even after he passed away, he continued to give those lectures. He's the only ghost professor. I also wanted to point out a historical fact that I found out just recently that I did not know before. When I told my father that I was speaking to Kiwanis and that I had joined Kiwanis, he told me that in 1965, he gave a lecture to the Perth Amboy chapter of Kiwanis. This is in New Jersey. He immigrated to Perth Amboy from Pakistan in 1963. He's a physician at Perth Amboy General Hospital, where he met my mother, who's a nurse from a nearby small town called Sayreville, which, as you all know, is the town of John Bon Jovi. My father gave a lecture about Pakistan in 1965 to the Kiwanis chapter in Perth Amboy. So this is the second time a member of my family is addressing the Kiwanis Club, and 55 years later. I think that this will be an excellent discussion. So I actually am going to try to keep my presentation to about 15 minutes. As this slide says, my name is Jameel Haque. I'm a professor of history at Minnesota State University, Mankato. I'm also the relatively new director, I took over in January, of the Kessel Peace Institute, an institute which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I joined Kiwanis this summer because of the great work you do all around our beautiful town, state, country, and world. What I'll be speaking about today falls under our mission of improving the world one child and one community at a time. The idea of renaming Sibley Park will help our kids locally and around the region know that we have a commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. I believe it will expand the definition of what it means to be a citizen of Mankato. If we truly want all the children of Mankato to wake up in a world that values them, this is a small but necessary step in that direction. So what's the problem? The problem is exactly that. How do we create a Mankato where we privilege every citizen's voice and promote diversity, inclusion, and equity? Whose story is the Mankato story? Do we want our city to be inclusive of all groups or privilege the white settler narrative over all others? And I'll explain that further as we go on. See, I'm missing my students, so I have to give everybody a lecture. As pertains to Sibley Park, the showcase of our city park system, and it's a fantastic park, I propose that we have a problem. Henry Hastings Sibley was instrumental in the signing of a treaty that led to the Dakota War. Finally, he condemned over 300 people to death, all of whom were prisoners of war, and promised fair treatment. Those trials took place at Sibley Park. Now let's backtrack a little to talk about the biography of Henry Sibley. Here he is looking very heroic in his portrait from the Minnesota State Historical Society website. Sibley, who was born in Detroit, came to Minnesota, like most immigrants, in pursuit of a job. It was as a fur trader in Minnesota that Sibley established a working relationship with native Dakota people. Sibley later used these relationships to help negotiate a treaty with the Dakota people. Sibley misled Dakota leader Little Crow and other Dakota leaders about the content of that treaty. That is, of course, the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux. It should be noted that Sibley himself netted $66,000 personally from this treaty. The Dakota tribe only received $60,000. After leaving the fur trade, Sibley became a politician and eventually became the first governor of the Star of the North, Minnesota. His prominence in the state and knowledge of the Dakota led him to be picked as a colonel to prosecute the Dakota War. He was in charge. Historical records show that Sibley was referred to as Minnesota's Undertaker because of his knack of showing up after battles had been fought. He was not a particularly skilled military leader. This slide shows the extent of the treaty that Sibley negotiated. If you see on the slide, the green area is all of the area that the Dakota tribes gave to Minnesota and to the United States. The size of the land given away was not the misleading aspect of the treaty. The misleading aspects of the treaty was the size of the payment from the United States to the Dakota and how that money would be delivered. Much of the payment for the land was to be given in food, which the Dakota were not made aware of, and a good amount went to the fur trading companies. Remember Henry Sibley? Henry Sibley was a representative of the fur trading companies to settle debts, which the Dakota were also not made aware of. In 1862, it was the withholding of this food promised in the treaty by the US government that was one of the main causes of the war. So we know what we know, but if we know that Sibley's actions were wrong, why do we have a park named for Sibley? Why do so many people insist on not changing the name of the park? As a side note, a friend of mine who works for the DNR was recently putting in a boat launch at Duck Pond over in Madison Lake, and his coworker turned to him and said, "Do you hear some guys trying to rename Sibley Park?" Just out of the blue. So this is something that's spread around the community that we're trying to do this. So why do so many people insist on not changing the name? And secondly, why is there no monument or even basic acknowledgement of these events in Sibley Park? So we return to the question, what should and what will Mankato be known for? We look to our past to determine what we want from our future. Well, there are a few things we already are known for outside of the region. Maud Hart Lovelace's Betsy Tacy series is, in my opinion, the most positive thing Mankato is known for nationally. I might be biased. I am a board member of the Betsy Tacy Society. Every summer weekend, tourists roam my neighborhood, the Lincoln Park neighborhood, in search of locations from these books. Now, additionally, my friends around the country know Mankato as the land of bizarre traffic accidents. Here we have a picture of the dog that crashed a semi-truck into a gas station. That's over on 169 a couple of years ago. The accident that led to hogs blocking Highway 169, and the attempted murder of the Profinium building on New Year's Eve one year. But sadly, this is what Mankato is known for. While the hanging of the 38+2 happened downtown, much of the events leading up to it happened at and in Sibley Park. After the war wound down, when Sibley called upon the Dakota to surrender, many did. It should be noted that most Dakota did not fight in the war. Only a small portion took up arms. When the Dakota surrendered, the elderly, the women, the children were force-marched up to Fort Snelling and then exiled to South Dakota. Many, if not most of these non-combatants died during this relocation. This occurred directly due to the actions of Sibley, who had promised them safety, not death and exile. The men were incarcerated as prisoners of war at Sibley Park. There they were tried without lawyers by a jury of militia that had fought against them. Some trials lasted only a couple of minutes, and 303 of those prisoners of war were condemned to death. Had Sibley had his way, all 303 prisoners of war would have been killed. We all know that individuals like Henry Whipple intervened, and that Abraham Lincoln, then president, thousands of miles away, dedicated substantial amounts of time, labor, and resources to reviewing all of the trial transcripts. Lincoln recommended that only 2 of the prisoners be executed. Sibley demanded more, hence the 38 POWs who were hanged altogether on December 26, 1862. Now, I believe that renaming Sibley Park fits into the framework and context of Mankato's move towards reconciliation. We now have a powwow. We've changed the Mankato state mascot in the late 1970s, and we've created Reconciliation Park. Some of you may well have been involved in these actions. I think that renaming Sibley Park would be another step towards reconciliation. Now, there are some objections. Of course, objection number 1, you are erasing history. Since I've announced this initiative earlier in the summer, 2 main objections have been raised. I will assure you we are not erasing history. I'm an expert. As a historian, I literally write history and I teach it. My students know that history is never a full or necessarily even an accurate picture of the past, but a nuanced story that we tell for multiple reasons. History is the conglomeration of the stories a society tells itself and others to reveal what it prioritizes in the present and how it wants to move into the future. What should our history be? This is our town, this is our time, and we get to determine what our history focuses on. The history that I learned growing up was one of white achievement and white ethnic triumphs over brown and black people. Think about how Tenzing Norgay carried all of the equipment up Mount Everest, but it's Edmund Hillary who gets the credit for climbing Mount Everest. Or how Magellan, despite not having actually achieved his goal of sailing around the world, gets credit as being the first human to sail around the world. He wasn't. On his voyage, it was an enslaved person known to history only as Enrique, who, when realizing he was back on the island in Indonesia that Portuguese slavers had kidnapped him on, ran away. History is both biased and inaccurate. It represents the bias of the historian and the bias of the society at the time, as well as their vision of what is valued. What do we in 2020 in Mankato value? Do we privilege Sibley's role as the first governor of Minnesota over his nefarious role in the Dakota War? What and do we value, and whose story do we value? Now, to change gears a little bit, I had to present you with some of my research, and I want to give you just a quick history of history. One of my research specialties as a historian is the creation of Western history and the idea of the story of Western civilization. This man here is James Harvey Robinson. He was a professor at Columbia University from about 1900 to about 1920. And it was Robinson who basically created the narrative of Western civilization, and with it, our own historical narrative. Before Robinson, history was largely based on no grand story. The only grand story connecting it in the United States would have been biblical history. As far as the story of Western civilization, you probably have it backgrounded in your mind. Civilization starts in ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. It spreads to Greece. Then it is absorbed and improved on by Rome. Rome gets invaded and crushed by barbarians. We enter a dark age. The Renaissance rediscovers Greece and Rome via the Muslims. Then comes the Protestant Reformation, the Enlightenment, and then, boom, here we are today, modernity. When the United States was founded in 1776, none of the founding fathers, none of the founders of our nation would have thought of history the way we do. History changes. History is malleable. And this history, the history that is largely taught today, is the triumph of Western civilization over everyone else. And Western civilization is exclusionary, being defined as the white Christian men of Western and Northern Europe. Even though we as modern historians have challenged aspects of Robinson's invented history, we still teach the basic outline of it. In my research, I refer to this as the trunk of history, and that all of our diversity and inclusion of non-Western history is just adding and grafting limbs onto that original trunk. The ultimate point I'm trying to make here is that modern history reproduces the original assumption that the West, again, think Western Europe and Northern Europe, are the best, and that the West is white, Christian, and largely male. At least history is, the way we teach history is. So we have to ask then, whose story do we honor when we name a park after Henry Sibley? Therefore, are we erasing history? No, history is fluid. We are recentering it away from the story of one ethnic group's victory over another. We do so to acknowledge that the experiences of brown, black, and indigenous people are a part of Mankato too. Now, there's a second major objection that I've heard. When I was a kid, I went to Sibley Park. If you change the name of that park, it will ruin my memories of it. This is the park that I grew up going to. It's called Christopher Morley. It's a very similar park to Sibley Park, except it has a 9-hole golf course on it, about the same size. I could walk to this little park in Long Island. This is New Hyde Park, New York, in Long Island, New York. And it is very similar in size. Christopher Morley was an early 20th century writer who was sort of a blend of Ernest Hemingway and Henry David Thoreau. He was a novelist whose most famous work, Kitty Foyle, was turned into a series that ran for 2 years as a TV show on NBC in 1958. Christopher Morley even built himself a little cabin, just like Henry David Thoreau. And that little cabin was moved to the property. It looks remarkably like Ott's cabin at Sibley Park. I used to go to this park to play basketball, to swim, to hike in the woods. The Boy Scouts and the Eagle Scouts camped there. Many of my fondest memories were made in that park. However, if you told me that Christopher Morley served in World War I and, like Sergeant York, managed to capture 132 German POWs, then marched them to Long Island, put them on trial in this park, and condemned them to die, I would want to rename this park. Perhaps the John Kind Park. I think it's better to say that this is the park that I went to as a child. As an adult, I realized the problem of that name, which I helped change. Now I can bring my kids to Sharon Taylor Park and help them and tell them that I helped to rename it. Now, I believe that Kiwanis should be in favor of this name change because it hits all of the 6 major objects of Kiwanis. It will give primacy to the spiritual well-being of the whole Mankato community with the spiritual value of reconciliation. It will encourage the golden rule and the rule of reciprocity. It promotes the adoption of higher social values and standards, and it is inclusive of all of Mankato's ethnic communities. It develops a more intelligent community and a more informed citizenry, and it provides lasting friendship between our settler communities and our native communities. It is the just and the right thing to do. Now, what are the next steps? How does one even change a park name in Mankato? Should we add a monument? Should we do both? Would Kiwanis be willing to help? Obviously, Kiwanis is very associated with this park. What are possible name changes? Page Park is the name in Betsy Tacy. Kiwanis Park, I mean, we have such an association with that park because of the holiday lights. Kessel Peace Park, again, John Kind Park.
Oh, you don't know my history, Jameel.
Okay, that's a fair point. I'll take that out. I would love your feedback, and I tried to leave as much time as possible here for discussion. For those of you that want further reading suggestions and contact info, I can be contacted at peace@mnsu.edu. And a great book about the backgrounding of the white narrative in American society is called White Fragility. It's a very popular book right now at MSU. Mary Wingard is the one who wrote the sort of definitive history of Mankato. She's a professor over there at St. Cloud State, North Country, the Making of Minnesota. And if you haven't listened to Little War on the Prairie, Mankato State, well, MSU's own Dr. Gwen Westerman is featured heavily in that. And that is an NPR story that you can listen to on the internet or on the radio. So thank you again for having me here. And I really look forward to questions and discussion. And again, this was, it's always my pleasure to talk to you guys. Let's see.
Very nice, Jameel. Do you want to stop sharing? There you go. All right. I'm going to start off with a question. I saw it on one of the screens, but I'm not sure that it registered with me how this happens. So how do you go about changing the name of a park? What has to happen? That's a city park, right? So it has to go to the city?
I don't know. I've decided to start this process by listening to everybody and then to determine a clear action path. We're hoping to get together a meeting of our executive board of the Kessel Peace Institute very soon. I suspect from the inquiries that I've made that this would have to go to the city council for a vote.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Are there a lot of other places named after Sibley in Minnesota? I would guess there would be, with him being the first governor.
Well, here in Mankato, we have Sibley Street. I think it would be, there's more problems renaming a street, people's mail. We have problems right now at the post office. I don't want to cause anybody living there any inconvenience. So I don't think there's necessarily a problem with having a Sibley Street. There's a town and there's a county. I believe there's a bunch of high schools, maybe in the cities, named after Sibley. I just think that because of its relationship to what happened there with the names association, I think that the park itself should be renamed.
May I say something?
Yes,
Go ahead,
please.
go ahead.
I feel that if the name is not changed, the emphasis should then be on the horrible things he did there. And this is an insult, naming the park for him.
Yeah.
Would be the answer.
I think that a very real thing that it would not be controversial would be that we need to build a monument or some sort of acknowledgement in the park of what happened. You know, if the name is changed, the name is changed. And if not, I think building a monument would be, is necessary. So I would prefer to do both, but I think your point is well taken. Thank you.
Other questions for Dr. Haque?
Yeah, Jameel, Mike
Yes,
here.
Mike.
Hey, I'm guessing you've probably at least become familiar with the Thomas Hughes history of Blue Earth County. That is one from I believe it's about 1901 or so. The sad thing about that, and another history that I've read, is that it reflects very much the point of view of the time, shall we say that? And I'm wondering, do you know, other than the one that you referred to, have there been other histories written in a more modern period of the Dakota conflict and various other aspects of Mankato and southern Minnesota?
You know, I don't necessarily know. I do know that my neighbor, who I think is a very conscientious, now retired social studies teacher at East High School, Daryl Arsdorf, he was telling me about, he used to teach a resource called the Dakota Conflict that was a better resource. But I'm not sure how old that is, or he told me it was a very good resource. So I haven't read it yet, and I'm not exactly sure who publishes it or who wrote it. But there are other sources. You know, this is, if you had asked me as a student in AP US history and a professional historian about the Dakota War a year ago, I knew almost nothing. I think that's outside of Minnesota, that's very common. I see.
There was a time, oh, I'm sorry. There was a time that I was the interim director of the Treatyside History Center over in St. Peter. And that was a really wonderful position to be in. And there's a little gift store there. And in that gift store, and this is quite some time ago now, there were several books. I can't bring any of the names to memory at the moment, but there were several books that told that story. And of course, they were written not anytime, real modern, but there's several that gave a more, an actual, it was not just all white perspective, let me say it that way. And even when I got there, the whole history center kind of was still from a white perspective. And so I was glad to be able to have my short stint there because I could start to change that a little bit. But there are more books out there. I absolutely know there are.
I can actually, if you'd be interested, if everybody would be interested, I can put together a bibliography. It would be a good resource for me. And so I'll do that, and I should have that available to email to everybody by next meeting.
Yeah, I do have the book. Is it Over the Earth We Come or something? It's a variation of a quote of a Dakota person at that time. Very good because it does show both sides of the conflict.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when I talk about this, or when we start talking about renaming Sibley and what happened there, people hear, oh, the only victims in this war were the natives. And that's not what I'm arguing. I'm the director of a Peace Institute. War is terrible. War inevitably hurts women and children more than it hurts any soldier. And the things that happened to the settlers during the Dakota War were horrible. And we can certainly acknowledge that as well. I feel it's been acknowledged in a lot of ways, and we need to move forward in on our path to reconciliation.
All right, any other questions?
Well, I'm wondering,
Go ahead, Mike.
in the outreach that you have done so far, have you found what we find at Vine when we're trying to do some programs on diversity and recognition of the white fragility idea is that many people put up a wall before you can even get to the specifics of what you're talking about. I'm wondering if you have found that to be true.
It's interesting that since this is COVID times, most of what I've seen that's a negative reaction. I gave this presentation to Rotary last week, and I'll give it to Vine, I'll give it to the Maverick Diversity Institute, and I may probably give it to Betsy Tacey, maybe one or two more. I haven't had any in-person very negative responses. However, if you go back to the Free Press article that was written when I announced this, the comments are horrible. People feel emboldened on Facebook or the internet to drop Minnesota nice and really say awful things, but that's been the case with anything we've done of social justice here in Mankato. But fortunately, the response hasn't been particularly bad. I didn't realize that it would be this controversial to a lot of people, and I think that when you talk to younger people, college students and high school students, they are almost uniformly in favor of this. And I think that for those of us that are over the age of 40, this becomes more of a political question almost. I don't think there's anything political about it, or there shouldn't be. I think this is just the right thing to do.
Jameel, what,
yes,
if anything, are you asking specifically of our Kiwanis Club, or of your Kiwanis Club?
I am not today. I may in the future. I don't know what the reception will be when I actually try to move from the informational step to the action step. And if it is such that I need backup, I may ask Kiwanis for a statement or for some sort of formal support in renaming this park, specifically because we're so involved. I don't think anybody associates any name with Sibley Park as much as Kiwanis. So in a way, we're already invested in this issue.
All right.
I have a question. Would you consider putting this on the ballot?
You know, I wondered about that. It's certainly, I would think it would be too much of a rush to get it. I'm sure probably too late for a item vote here in November, but as possibility for something in 2022, I'm not in any rush. I think that the slower this goes, the better it'll be. So that I thought about that, Pat. I really, I think that's not a bad idea. I don't know if that's actually a way that we can do this. And I don't know that anybody's ever renamed a park. I don't know how the Malda Farnham, which I think is the coolest park in Mankato, park got named. So.
That's because Malda did all the work there.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
how did that process to name that?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, Joe's a member of our club, so you could ask Joe that sometime.
Okay.
About his husband, yeah. He might have some good information for you there. So, all right, we are coming up on 1 o'clock. Thank you very much, Jameel. That was very interesting and some real good food for thought for us. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about this in the coming weeks and months. And wish you luck with that. Mike, do you want to let us know who we're going to have next week?
Oh, you kind of caught me off guard here. I think, is it Molly McEnany? She's with the American Lung Association. And I know that she spoke with us, was it a couple of years ago, about the efforts that they're putting in toward removing the flavored, all of those tobacco products that kind of attract the younger audience. And they have moved on to the ethanol, not ethanol, what the flavored.
There, Mike.
Let's just say flavored products.
Yeah,
So
all right.
we'll be speaking on what their latest efforts are on that subject.
All right, so that's next week. Kelly McKenty from the American Lung Association should let you guys know too that the week after that is Labor Day weekend. And as usual, we'll meet on Tuesday of that week instead of Monday if you want to put that on your schedule. With that, Corey, want to say happy birthday to your twins and hope they enjoyed their birthday or will enjoy their birthday. And with that, Orion, you want to lead us with when Kiwanis calls?
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. When Kiwanis calls, when Kiwanis calls, let everyone stand up. When Kiwanis calls, when Kiwanis calls, let each one raise his call. As we gather around the table, as long as we are able, we'll pledge to thee our loyalty. When Kiwanis calls. Bye, everybody.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a good week. We'll see you next week.